Colin Bond Australia's most underrated driver? Bondy was a man who could do it all. He conquered rallying, touring cars, and remained competitive well into his 40s. But despite his success, Bond is often overlooked when discussing Australia's greatest motorsport legends. Was he overshadowed by bigger personalities? Or was he simply too versatile for his own good and did not dominate one particular category? Today we take a deep dive into why Colin Bond is Australia's most underrated driver. Bond's rise to prominence was unique. Unlike many of his touring car contemporaries, he first made a name for himself in rallying. A standout talent in the dirt, he was quickly noticed by legendary team manager Harry Firth, who saw potential in Bond beyond rally stages. As a relative unknown, plucked straight from rallying, Bond was placed into the newly formed Holden Dealer Team in 1969, alongside another young upstart, Peter Brock, and it didn't take long for him to prove his worth. In 1969, Bond achieved something that most drivers could only dream of. He won the Bathurst 500. Partnering with Tony Roberts in a Holden Monaro GTS 350, Bond delivered Holden its first factory-backed victory at Mount Panorama, defeating the might of the Ford factory team and its Falcon GTHO, along with their legendary drivers, the Gagan brothers, and a young Alan Moffat. It was a statement win, announcing Bond as a force to be reckoned with on the tarmac, not just the rally stages. But while Bond was making headlines in circuit racing, he was simultaneously winning in rallying. In the early 70s, he won 3 Australian Rally Championships in 71, 72 and 74, proving his versatility across both disciplines. Few drivers in history have managed to compete at an elite level in both disciplines at the same time. Bond certainly was one that could. He was the ultimate all-rounder, able to adapt to any surface, any car, and any competition. Finnish driver Runo Aaltonen once said that he had no doubt that Colin Bond would have been in the top 6 in the world if he went rallying in Europe. With his Bathurst win and rally dominance, Bond became a key driver for the Holden Dealer Team under the guidance of Firth. Throughout the mid to late 70s, Bond was consistently among the front runners in the Australian Touring Car Championship and sports sedans, battling the likes of Peter Brock, Alan Moffat, Bob Morris and John Goss. But despite his success, Bond was often in Brock's shadow at HDT. While the affable Brock became the face of Holden's motorsport program, Bond was the consistent, reliable driver who quietly delivered results. In 1975, Bond won the Australian Touring Car Championship, driving the Holden Dealer Team Tirana L34. It was the first time he competed a full championship season, after previously only doing sporadic championship events due to his focus on the Australian Rally Championship. Winning the Touring Car Championship is the ultimate mark of consistency, proving he wasn't just a one-off race winner, he was a championship caliber driver. He followed this up with runner-up positions in both the 76 and 77 seasons as well, although in 1977, it was in a Ford. Bond joined the Alan Moffat factory team for Ford in 1977, despite his huge success he'd had at the Holden Dealer Team. Supposedly induced by a significant increase in salary, along with the ability to run Ford's rally program, the move at the time looked to have been the right choice. Both Moffat and Bond dominated the 1977 Touring Car Championship, and then finished the year off with the iconic 1-2-4 formation finish at the Bathurst 1000. But in the long term, Bond's departure from the Holden Dealer Team arguably cost him more. While Moffat's factory backing faded after 1978, Brock and the Holden Dealer Team became an unstoppable force in the late 70s and early 80s. Had Bond stayed, he could have been part of the Holden Dealer Team's golden era, potentially winning multiple Bathursts alongside Brock and being in the most competitive machinery for the Touring Car Championship. As mentioned earlier, part of Bond's contract with Ford was to lead Ford's official rally team in the late 70s and early 80s, spearheading the legendary Ford Escort RS 1800 program, along with Ford's factory entry into the infamous Repco Round Australia trial of 1979. While Alan Moffat led Ford's circuit racing efforts, Bond was in charge on taking on the rally scene, bringing his immense experience from his Holden days to the Blue Oval. Bond remained a front-running force in Australian rallying, demonstrating that even as his touring car career continued, he never lost his touch on gravel, finishing third in both the 78 and 79 seasons and runner-up in the 1980 Australian Rally Championship. He was once again proving himself as one of the most versatile drivers in Australian motorsport history. Despite his brief Ford success, Bond found himself at a crossroads in 1980. He was one of the top names in Australian touring cars, and Ford saw his potential. Alongside Jim Richards, Bond was considered to lead a new factory-backed Ford team in touring car racing, a move that could have made him the undisputed #1 Ford driver in Australia. But the project never materialised. Ford pulled the plug, leaving Bond without the full factory support he had hoped for. Instead, he spent much of the early 80s in privately run teams, driving for the likes of Steve Masterson in the Ford Capri, and later leading the Alfa Romeo attack in Group A. Always competitive, but never quite having the full backing that Brock and Moffat enjoyed. It was another missed opportunity that could have significantly altered Bond's legacy. Despite the setbacks, Bond remained one of the most consistent drivers in the Touring Car Championship. While others faded, he adapted. Even as the category evolved in the late 80s with new cars and international influence increasing, Bond was still fighting at the front. In 1988, at the age of 47, he was still winning Touring Car Championship rounds and finished third in the Australian Touring Car Championship, and also finishing third at Bathurst in the iconic Ford Sierra RS500, proving he still had the raw speed and racecraft to battle the younger drivers. Colin Bond was more than just a Bathurst winner. He was a multi-discipline champion, a driver who could win in anything, and a competitor who was still at the top of his game nearly 2 decades into his career. If a few things had gone differently, if he'd stayed at the Holden Dealer Team, or if the Ford factory team of the 1980s happened, would we be talking about him as a multiple-time Bathurst winner, or even a multiple-time Australian Touring Car champion? I guess we'll never know. So what do you think? Was Colin Bond one of Australia's most underrated racing drivers? Should he be remembered as one of our true greats? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of the Racing Chronicles. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.